Greetings, one and all. I've got a lot going on today, and I'm hoping I can keep it together. You just saw that Celestion cream speaker. More on that later. You might notice a couple of mics. Well, I'm preparing to do a comparison, which I think I might have done already, but I'll do it again if I haven't, between these two. One of them is an Earthworks Ethos, and the other one is an Earthworks IconPro. So I thought I'd warm them both up, and I'd switch between them, if I remember, during the video. I'll give you notice. And then I thought, I won't say which is which until the end, if I remember. Now, a gentleman in the comments, I'm going to switch now, why not? A gentleman in the comments sent quite a long email, which I shall pretty much read for you, even though I'll put it on screen as well. He said it's StringStorm, and he said a very excellent and incredibly relaxing review. It doesn't seem to make sense to you because you are a performer. We're talking about now, I think I made a comment about the SM58 or the SM57. So I'd like to go through the email because bits of it I kind of recognize as a way of thinking, and it still doesn't make sense to me. So I would like to see what you think of it. No offense to StringStorm, I'm sure. The things that don't quite sit with me. If I go through here then. So he's saying it doesn't make sense to perform it. It makes sense to you to use whatever microphone you would think best suited for your voice. Well, for my voice, as we know, I like an extended and flat microphone. Now, one of the first things I think is, why is that an issue? I just don't see it. If it's extended and flat, and the person behind the desk, okay, decides there's too much low end, which there might be in a certain room or with a PA, it's easy to cut. And smooth to cut because it's flat, there's not spikes all over the place that you're having to manage. If you feel you want a bit more cut in the 6K and it's flat, you can just boost the 6K depending on how wide or wherever it is you want. And you're not boosting other jagged frequencies which are sticking up, which would be impossible to... So I just don't see that to begin for the off, for a kick-off. But anyway, he goes on to say that the engineers and technicians that make the performance happen. Well, a couple of things I'd just like to mention with that, I'm going to swap mics again, is I noticed we use the word engineers and technicians. Engineers and technicians. So you've got a kind of an artist, I like to think of myself as a bit, and I can handle modern equipment. I don't need to be an engineer or a technician. However, I remember being in the studios back in the day with 24-track tape machines, and when they needed calibrating and setting up and all sorts of measuring equipment to get the azimuth on the heads and whatever else, and the motors and the belt would need changing if things were getting a little bit, and cleaning. Yeah, too much. You need an engineer and a technician. So the very fact that we use those words these days, I'm thinking has a certain mentality to it that perhaps is no longer valid. Yes, I can see with a multi-rig thing, I don't do that, no more than 500 seaters and places. And the stuff was very reliable. Didn't have any engineers and technicians there. Well, I had somebody on the desk. Often, I wish they didn't. Just let me set it up. And we don't need to alter anything, really. Mostly. And they weren't. They were the staff. They were dancers and singers, and they had to do all sorts of stuff, including that. So the engineers and technicians, I can see, yeah, if you're doing a Wembley Stadium, all the rest of it, all that rigging and all the connection of the cables and all the making sure the impedances and no mistakes there, yes, engineer, technician. But when it comes closer and closer to the music, which is behind the desk, yeah, the modern desks are so fairly complex, aren't they? But you know what I'm saying? I think perhaps you need an artist, and I know, indeed, many of the big acts have their own engineer. Let's find a different word, perhaps. So, that's what I think about that. Interesting word. That's from back in the day. is it applicable anymore to think of yourself that way? Because it might be rather limiting, rather gear-heady, which I can get into. So then it says, it makes perfect sense to use something like an SM58 or a 57. So it makes perfect sense to use a shaped, inaccurate microphone from way back. He goes on to say why. Not because it is the best, nor is it the most prolific microphone, because every person who works on the nitty-gritty details knows it, how it sounds, how to work with it, and more. How about this, that it doesn't sound at all? What a relief. Then all that knows how to make it work. How to make it work makes... it goes on to say, it makes finding pesky resonant frequencies much easier, since almost everyone knows it. But I've got to ask you, is that pesky resonant frequency not the mic itself? Where are we going to get pesky resonant frequencies from? Well, the room? Or the PA? Or the mic? Or the voice? Well, seems to me a flat mic with and fast. Any one of those is going to be easier to sort it. If the singer finds a shaped mic, which I'm going to put it in a slightly mean way, that compensates for deficiencies in their voice. We've all got them. And this mic, headphones, wherever I use it, whatever the shape of this mic, it suits what I would call a deficiency in my voice. Then yeah, go with that. But it's probably not going to be an SM58 or 57. They'll say, no, get rid of that, have this. So I don't see any logic, really, when one looks at it. Oh, go on then. Finds making pesky resonant frequencies much easier, since almost everyone knows it. So you get a mic with a pesky resonant frequency, make sure everybody knows it, and the first thing you have to do is get rid of the pesky resonant frequency. No? Or am I missing something? I could go on. And since everyone's on the same page, now you've introduced the coloration. We've all got that coloration, which you could have done without. It makes collaborating to make the sound of your audience much more pleasing. He goes on to make an analogy with headphones, which I don't quite agree with either, saying that they use certain headphones because it's the standard default headphone for monitoring. Because if I use this headphone for monitoring and other people use it for monitoring, then they would be able to pick up much the same things I'm picking up. Well, what they're picking up much the same as is the headphones. Get better headphones, dude. Doesn't mean they're hearing through those accentuated the unpleasantness of the headphone and then really hearing what's going on. They're picking up much the same. You understand what I'm trying to say? A lot of what you're going to be picking. Why use bad headphones? It's 2023. Anyway, so if you truly want the best for your mic, I personally wouldn't go with the shiny new fancy ones. Well, doesn't really matter whether it's shiny and new and fancy. Really, if it does a job. But anyway, I'd go with the tried and true. The old reliable workhorse. I've got more to say on it. you might not be surprised to hear. Righty. More notes. Crikey. Oh, the Celestion Cream speakers. Come back to that. Yeah, so as a performer, well, what do I want as a performer? I want it needs to capture all my voice, which we all know, oh, okay, I'm lower than most. But many go near. Even ladies, not actually near, but have done this before. You notice a difference if that's not there. Not only that, I want the clarity. Got to swap mics here. I want the clarity as well, because that's the kind of thing I do. Now, I can accept if you're a rock screamer, then I do some of that, or blues. Honest with the blues things I do, you're not really going to hear it. But there's no detriment that I've heard from the good mic. And if you want to run it through a valve PA or whatever processing, just do that. EQ the hell out of it. If it's flat, you can do that quite reliably, it seems to me. So that's what I want. And of course, I want rejection of pops as best. I want low handling noise as best. It needs to be robust as best. I need all that as well, because it's going to be for live. I could do with a bit more fragile because I take care, but I can understand most people. I've been through the engineers and technicians stuff and comparing where that phrase came from, and we're in a digital thing where you don't have to do all that stuff, that technical engineering stuff, really. He did say to makes the performance happen. Well, I would hope that the musicians make the performance happen. I can see what you mean. If it's drenched in feedback, no matter how good the performance is, then it's no use, is it? But I just wonder, he did say, Well, I won't go on about it. Can't find it anyway. Anyway, I'm not sure that the engineer and technician make the performance happen. They facilitate it, maybe. But it's just language. I'm not having a... No. Every person knows it. I've been through that. Anything there? Oh, I've got this. You have the possibility these days, in modern stuff, which is great. It's fantastic. Modern stuff. A lot of it. Not all of it. You have the potential, the possibility these days, of an open window onto a view as you listen. But you prefer a piece of smeared glass, and then you attempt to clean it. That's an analogy for me, somewhat. Right, let's look at the frequency graphs, if you may. I'm going to put those on. I'm going to have to go and get my one thing I forgot. Okay, looking at the frequency graphs. The top one, Earthworks SR40V, I pinched from Recording Hacks. Very good website. Thank you very much. Hope you don't mind. And the bottom one, you can see I put a link there. I came across this one, which rather usefully has the 57 and the 58 together. So the Earthworks, as you can see, just looks, I was going to say, unbelievably flat. I'm not casting aspersions, but flat as flat can be. What's the issue with that? Well, say you look at, it's very useful on this. I don't know if you can see it, the great, so it's got the various ranges. Oh yeah, bite and nasal frequencies. At the top, you see with those little brackets, sibilants and so on. Say you want a bit more sibilance. Well, seems to me quite easy with the flat one. You just use your Q, which is going to be gentle, and not going to put any jaggies in there because there aren't any, and you just lift that area. Shall I do that now? I don't know which mic I'm on. I'm on this mic now. So say I need a bit more, I'm going to put in the mid. I feel my voice a bit mid-flat. I've got this flat mic. I'm just upping the mid a little bit. I don't know if you can hear. I'm upping the mid a bit more, which is dirty. The pot's on this desk, man. I know. Keep quiet. I will do. There you go. I feel I need a bit more of that. It's a bit too much, isn't it? I'm going to turn it down a bit. So maybe there. And I'm going to put it flat. There we are, back to flat. So it's very easy to do, no? And you have complete control, I would say, because you've got the width of the Q and the amount. Say you wanted to do that to the one below, or say you wanted to reduce the 57 or the 58 in that area, sibilance and so on. Well, you've got some peaks there and you've got some dips either side of it. So you can have, and just at the end of it there, it drops right back down to 0. So you start lowering that area. You just haven't got the control, I can't see, to not fiddle about. Am I looking at which one I'm looking at? I was looking at the 57 there. And the 58, well, in that sibilance area, it's got a hump either side, and in the middle of the sibilance kind of area, or towards the top of it, there's a dip. Now, I understand that maybe people learnt how to do that. Maybe that's what StringStorm means. He's studied this, he's listened, and he knows that they've got... Oh, why bother starting with that in the first place? Seems to me to be ludicrous. The low end, for me, is no good. It hasn't got proximity trace on either of these. But... you know, the low end just starts dropping off too much. Just forget it. There we go. And at the very top, they says it goes to 20. Well, oh no, I don't think they do. I think they say they go to 15, which looks about right. Also, bear in mind that on the SM58 and the 57, there's going to be distortion in those top ends. I mean, the diaphragm will be won't be pistonic, so it gives grain and stuff. So when you start boosting those frequencies, you're going to boost that grain. Maybe you like that, but I'm just saying it doesn't seem to be a very good place to start in 2023. On we go. I'll leave that there just in case I need it again. Consider this. I was talking to Carl over the road at Rock Bottom Music in Croydon, where I bought my Fender Super Twin Reverb in 1979, which is what that speaker's about. I'll get to it eventually. And he was telling me all the stories of who he used to be with, the bands in the 60s and so on. He'd done all sorts of things. And he mentioned that, well, I can't remember the band, but he said, yeah. In those days, he said, I was there with the PA. He was doing the road. He was doing the engineering bit, all sorts. And he said, yeah, we used 2 4x12 guitar cabs either side for the vocals. That was back in the 60s. Possibly a valve amp driving them. 2 4x12 guitar cabs. Can you imagine? Well, I can imagine because I bought the Fender Valve PA100, which I think is an excellent valvey type mic head. It's like a bassman head. But it's a valve PA, and I've got the impedance converters and so on. You've probably seen my videos on it. The amp is very good. It's got a valvey sound to it, but it's very good. And I saw the speakers, matching speakers going on eBay, columns. They looked really kind of funky, nice. So I bought them. My God, I sold them. Somebody from a theatre bought them because they were doing some show from the 60s or something and wanted them as props. I did what I could with them. 4 8-inch speakers, that's it, in each cabinet. Cabinet not deep enough for any bass. That many speakers, just awful sounding. I used them on a gig with a friend and she didn't like it at all. So that's what you're dealing with. And what do you need with something like that? Well, I tell you what you need, I think. You need a mic that gives a bit of a shove, not in the very low because the speakers just can't handle the very low, but a bit higher up than that. Give it a bit of a shove. And at the top there, where you need all this intelligibility, give it a shove right there, mate, so that cuts through to help those poor speakers just do something to get across. So I'm thinking, yeah, back in the day, maybe that shaping didn't matter. Might have just been a coincidence of manufacture, because you can't, you'll find it's very difficult to get flat. Is that where it came from? It's just hung on since then. Other reasons why it may have hung on since then, even though the biodynamic M88 did a lot better from before, but it was much more expensive and not as robust because of the light diaphragm, and maybe this other reason that I'm going to come to. Before I come to that other reason, so that's that they're using for pesky resonances. I've said that's probably the mic half of it, and you've got to try and EQ all those humps out of it. Forget it. Old reliable workhorse. I said, not for me, thanks. It's 2023. Unless there's nothing better, and there are, I think, many that are better. Now, another reason for this, for still being around, well, one is that maybe people simply like it. Fair enough. I like the Volkswagen Beetle. They're not still around, but they were around for a long time, and I had 3 air-cooled, easy to service, like this, SM58 really, and did the job, kind of, not compared to today, nowhere near. Though I'd still have one for fun. And 3 experiences with the SM58 then. One of them is a place I worked at. I noticed all the students that I was getting were being, change mic, were being asked to buy a mic for themselves, and asked them the SM58. I said, why? Oh, they're all saying, get an SM58. Did you try it? No. Did they suggest you try it? No. Just get an SM58. Why? One of them, no, most of them didn't know the students, I've never had a mic before, just get it. And one of them did say, oh, yeah, because it's easy to EQ. So once again, we're not looking at the artist here. It's going straight to the so-called engineer and technician, which I accept. You have to have them. But it's easy to EQ. Why would that be, looking at the graph? Why on earth would that be easy to EQ? So that's one thing. They just got it, like loads of people just got the SM58, didn't try it, didn't ask anything, just got it. Another example was I was at a London club, performing there myself, and I took my mic along. They had some mics there, and they were all Shure mics. So Shure's got good mics, and not just the F58. Probably a bit of a pain for Shure, actually. They've got themselves, well, I don't know. And they only had Shure mics, actually. And I said, why is that then? And he said, oh, well, there was a deal that if those were the only mics seen on stage, we got a good deal. Okay, business is business. But that might be one of the reasons if you're good at business. You've got to be good at business, I suppose, otherwise you go under. And then another one was a gig, function gig. And again, just Shure mics, mostly 58s or 58As, betas. And I asked the engineer there. I said, how come it's only got the Shure mics? He said, well, nobody ever complains if they see one of these, apart from you. So yes, you can see there's that. What has developed, if I might put it this way? Possibly. Oh, the biodynamic did that with the M88 to some extent, from what I read. I told you with Phil Collins, I can see no reason why Phil Collins would particularly want the M88. I think it's probably because it's a drummer and it was used on the bass drums, and maybe he tried it for vocals, or Bio came along and said, hey, this works very well for singing, when he started singing. Which it does, and they'd cut the low end, I'm sure. Phil Collins didn't seem to go there. And I think they were used for the Queen or something in Australia. Why the Queen? Business is business. You've got to do it. So a lot of that goes on. And I think there's a bit of a snowball effect, like with the SM58s and the 57s, in that you know, it generally gets around that something's safe and effective. You know, 90% or something effective, no safe, no, yeah, great. Time goes by. Not so effective, but by now, you're kind of hooked. Well, maybe not so safe, but now, you're kind of hooked. So I think all those things together have led to a slightly irrational, tell me if I'm wrong, way of looking at things. So the old reliable workhorse, well, no thanks. The other thing is that what alternative is? I've had issues with this. Now, let's get to the nitty gritty. It's, yeah, what alternative is it? I wouldn't recommend the M88 because you have to learn a bit how to use that as an artist. They're probably not as tough. And they would need, I'm sure, the bass cutting. That's easy enough. The SE Electronics V7, I'd say, is a contender. Of course, they're trying to be careful to keep similar. It seems to be fairly similar to the 58. I think let's make it a little bit better, but not too much better, because otherwise it won't be a 58. We'll be in trouble. You know, just see how these things. And is there a reason for it? Come on, I can't see it. Tell me what the reason is. The other thing is a few other things I'll split down here. I think on the behalf of people that are using them, I think there's a bit of roboticism, as I said, safe and effective, and don't ask any questions. Just carry on. Familiarity, of course, we all get familiar with things. A bit of laziness for having a little look around and seeing, though I know there are lots of people that don't use them and use others and find them much better. But it takes a bit of effort, and it's just easier just to sit back and do the lack of interest and lack of artistry, maybe. The other thing is, yes, it does have a reputation, the 58 and 57s, for longevity. So that might be an issue. We can try something else. Well, does it really last? You don't know yet, because I haven't been around long enough. So I can see that there's, but, you know, some hesitance there, maybe. Excuse me. Nearly done. Well, I've mentioned this before. So, okay, you use those mics with their shape, and you stick them, 57 on a lot of instruments, and 58s on a lot of voices. And you got all that shape applied. I mean, it just doesn't make sense there. If you had a flat mic, you could just individually lift or separate. That was a slogan for an advert. And anyway, I don't really see it there. Now, that speaker, which is over there, I'm not going to get it back, I'm sorry. So I've got my 1979 180 watt Fender Super Twin Reverb. And a while ago, many years ago, I changed out the speakers for Celestion classic lead. The reason being is that the amp is 180 watts, and none of the speakers could handle that. Even the classic leads were rated at 80 watts each, that's 160. But I thought, I don't hammer it, so they should hold up. And indeed they have. But classic lead wasn't really, when I'm thinking about it now, what I was after. They're quite expensive. But they were better than the stock speakers that came. So again, now about 10 years ago, was it, or more, I had another little bash. I thought, these Alnico creams are 90 watts each. So they can handle the full output of the amp. And here's what is said about them. I just got it off a website today. Delivering a glorious laid-back attack. Warm lows. We'll swap mic. I prefer this one. Delivering a glorious laid-back attack. Warm lows and a brilliant bell-like charm. I think that's meant to be chime. That's me. Smooth organic mids. Fine-grained detail that adds a high-definition quality to the vocal range. Good Lord. I'm going to tell you something. Guitar speakers are worse than mics. Because at least you get the mic and you think, that's not what I expected from that. You're very lucky. You can send it back straight away, get a refund. If you buy it second hand or whatever, or you keep it for a while, at least you can sell it second hand if it's good nick and get a fair bit back. You can with the guitar speakers as well, but I tell you, it's got 8 bolts around the edge, each one of them. So you've got to unbolt the old one, bolt in the new one, which scratches as the bolts bite, scratches the frame a little bit. Test them out for a bit, break them in a bit stiff to start with maybe. And then you decide you don't like them. You've got to unbolt the whole lot and flog them slightly marked. Not that the marks make any difference, but it's difficult to say with a mic. If you don't do anything to it at all, well, just use it for a bit and don't scratch it or anything, it's going to be like brand new. The speakers won't be, because I have those little marks. Not that that matters. Let me go through this one more time. So speakers are more of a pain. Let me go through this one more time. Delivering a glorious laid-back attack, warm lows, and a brilliant bell-like chime. Smooth organic mids, fine-grained detail that adds a high-definition quality to the vocal range. When I'm choosing that speaker, and they're expensive, I tell you, £225 each. They were around about that, I think about 200 when I bought them. I've had them quite a while, just sat in the boxes. Quite expensive upgrade, isn't it? £400. Am I now going to stick an SM57 on the front of that? Look at the frequency chart. What's that going to do to my laid-back attack? I'll tell you what it'll do. Probably make it a bit more laid-back, because they're a little bit slow. The warm lows. I'll tell you what it'll probably do. It'll probably create slightly muggy lows. Brilliant bell-like chime. Well, wherever that chime is, it'll probably accentuate it and make it a bit grainy. There's a little bit of distortion in there as well. Smooth organic mids. Maybe. I think you could manage that. Fine-grained detail. Nope. That adds a high definition. Nope. Quality to the vocal range. Well, I wasn't really considering all that other alteration when I read that and decided, I didn't read that when I bought the speakers. What do I do now? Well, it's a 180 watt amp and it was dying. You need to mic it up. Just leave it as it is. Anyway, so I'm not having a go at anybody really. I'm just interested in this. This goes on, and I just can't see it. So, be interesting to see if any of you got any ideas on what's going on. Keep well, and I'll see you next time.